Okay, if you're a Black Sabbath fan, especially in the Ronnie James Dio days, Heaven and Hell, or if you're a Dio fan, I think you'll enjoy what I have today. Those of you that follow this channel, follow what I do, you know that I spend a lot of time looking in recent history. I'm kind of fascinated by this stuff, and I often look up newspaper articles to read what people were saying about things when they were happening. And I found this kind of interesting article about Black Sabbath not long after Ronnie James Dio joined. And it's not a very long article, but it's a little discussion with Geezer Butler and Ronnie James Dio about the changes that were being made and and the fact that he was now in the band and now what? Black Sabbath was making a big change. And for a lot of people, I know I'm not the only one that went through this. We were introduced originally to Black Sabbath with Dio in it. The first time I ever heard Black Sabbath was on the soundtrack of the movie Heavy Metal, where Mob Rules was on there. And so I just heard Mob Rules and I thought, okay, this is Black Sabbath because it's what it said. And I loved it. And I loved the voice. And it was just so amazing. And of course, I didn't know at the time, and I'd heard the name Ozzy Osbourne, but I hadn't learned yet that there was this whole other Black Sabbath that existed before Ozzy before Dio that was Ozzy, that he was the guy. And then of course, so to me, originally Black Sabbath was with Ronnie James Dio. And so I went back and learned later about the Ozzy stuff. And I actually have some cool stuff we're going to do comparing the two later. But this was just a cool article that talked about those early days. And if you are interested in that stuff, I think you'll enjoy this article. It's pretty cool. So this is from the Manchester Evening News, Friday, January 23rd, 1981. This is on page 38. And it says, Tony Jasper talks to Black Sabbath. And then the title is Sabbath Journey. Okay. Geezer Butler is the bass man in legendary Black Sabbath. Ronnie James Dio, ex-Rainbow, is the replacement lead vocalist for Ozzy Osbourne. The two are friendly. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. I love that. Got to make sure that everybody knows that Ozzy and Dio are buddies. Okay, whatever. Anyway, it's just kind of funny. And they also make a point here that Dio had been with Rainbow. And I put a video out not long ago where I was talking about Deep Purple. And one of my favorite things about Deep Purple is not just the music, but it's the family tree. And of course, Dio kind of comes off of that Deep Purple family tree because Ritchie Blackmore leaves Deep Purple, goes and starts the band Rainbow. And then, of course, Ronnie James Dio, who'd been with Elf, joins Rainbow. They put out those songs, start out, Man on the Silver Mountain, from their first album. Just so much great stuff. And then, of course, he leaves there and then he ends up here in Black Sabbath. And then, of course, goes on and does his solo stuff after this. But, okay. We met in a London hotel. It's afternoon, tea time. The hotel pianist plays White Cliffs of Dover. I inquire whether she knows Paranoid by Black Sabbath. She looks at me with disgust smacked across her features. Sabbath is Britain's definitive heavy metal band. They're from Birmingham, but now most of the outfit live in Los Angeles. They say it's warmer there. Sabbath bowed in the early 70s with an album and a German tour. They came back from Germany and found a hit album. The Sabs never looked back, although several times they've been perilously near calling it a day. And that's kind of interesting because when you go back and learn about Black Sabbath, that first album, they recorded it, I think it was like 5 hours. They knocked that thing out so fast, and they were so busy touring and doing other things, they didn't realize that they were creating a masterpiece. And it ended up just changing so many things. That first album, that first Black Sabbath album has had such wide influence on so many people, so many bands, so many musicians over the years. And it's just interesting that how he captures that here, that they didn't realize what they had done or what they were creating and how huge it got. Okay, so, and then it says at times they've come close to calling it a day. And if you go back and read the history there were so many things. And by the time they got to, I think it was Never Say Die, the band was just crumbling. Substance abuse, personality problems, on and on. And you could even hear it in the song Never Say Die didn't, they were really, in my opinion, kind of losing their way by the time you got there. Okay. Let's see, several times they've been parasitic. Ozzy caused the problems. He was in and out and in and out, and finally out was operative. At one time, and very briefly, a guy called Dave Walker sang lead vocals. Now, with Ronnie, things are settled. Dio is a fine singer. He also writes good rock material. Sabbath are touring the UK. Geezer says it proves one thing. He says, we're not finished. People give us up. We've had our problems, but now things are just great. Which is kind of, I tell you, it's so amazing thinking about this, because I don't know that people really expected it, that it would turn out the way it did. Because you had this iconic singer in Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath that was they became legends in their own time. And then to lose Ozzy, there were so many people that wrote them off. I mean, they were already kind of on their way out and disappearing and losing their way. And then they bring in who? Ronnie James Dio? And amazingly, that just kicked it in. Because Dio, he brought a totally different thing to that band. Because, of course, Ozzy was I shouldn't say it that way, but he was just a singer and a front man and a guy that was crazy and get the crowd riled up. But he wasn't offering a lot of it wasn't a creative force in the band. He wasn't writing music. He wasn't writing lyrics. I mean, Geezer was writing all the lyrics. And the music, of course, is being written by the band, and Ozzy was just the guy singing it. Where Dio walks in, and you can hear the change. I mean, you listen to that Heaven and Hell, you listen to that album, and it's different. And it's more mature. It's changed. The sound changed. It's like, and they really did kind of get a shot in the arm. It brought them back where they were disappearing. And then Heaven and Hell was just so good. It was great. The song Heaven and Hell was amazing. And Neon Nights, that was the first song on the album, wasn't it? Anyway, and it was like this whole new thing that they created. And then, of course, Mob Rules, which to me is even better than Heaven and Hell. But anyway, that's another story. Okay, so Geezer, extra proof. Let's see, things are great. Geezer adds extra proof when he mentions the recent Heaven and Hell album. On that, he's right. The title track is a stormer. And also in top-class vintage Sabbath is Neon Nights. Okay, yeah. So that was also on this album. The recent hit single, Die Young, and good but not as tops as the already mentioned We Come, Lonely is the Word, and Walk Away. The pianist, now he's getting back to the story where he's interviewing them, plays Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Geezer and Ronnie exclaim, what the heck's that? Geezer is asked by me how he rates current Sabbath with past years. He says, quote, I think we're more open to different musical directions now. I think the present stands up well. The band is getting into the way we want it to sound. That may sound a weird statement, but it takes ages to put into practice ideas you may have. Life was difficult toward the end of Ozzy's reign. I mean, when he wasn't there, we were being left with instrumentals. It meant us all attempting vocals together, of course, unquote. Ronnie James Dio says, quote, I'm just as I was. I'm me, my style. It fits with Sabbath. I've always wanted to write what I take part in. And that's actually an interesting thing. I've always wanted to write what I take part in, because if you go back and read about the Rainbow stuff with Ritchie Blackmore was a pretty heavy-handed guy. And from what I understand, the things that I've read, he really didn't let people get too involved with the music. It was his stuff. And Dio apparently was able to kind of get some of his ideas in, but Ritchie Blackmore was heavy-handed about the whole thing, and it really wasn't a team approach. And it isn't just Dio that would say that. There's other people that have talked about when they were in Rainbow with him that it was dictator. Everything that went down. There wasn't a lot of collaboration. And that, I think, is why he makes his point here. I've always wanted to write what I take part in. And so he's able to, he kind of like seeming to be making a statement of want to be more involved. And it's interesting then, because when he went off and did his solo stuff, at least supposedly, I've read interviews and listened to people talk about it, he did a pretty good job of getting the creative input. At least he tried to, and he says that in his interviews, of getting everybody's creative input. I mean, for heaven's sakes, he got Vivian Campbell in there, and he was this brilliant guitar player. And he was able to, although it was his band, his name, he collaborated a little bit more. And I think maybe tried to learn a little bit from the stuff that happened in Rainbow. Okay, I'm getting way off here. I think here I've got a good blend with the others. I left Rainbow happily. The opportunity arose. I had met Sabbath at the time they were looking. We gave it a try and it worked. Unquote. Geezer adds, well, everything fell into place. We were in LA. We couldn't think of anyone in England. We've always liked what he's done. He sees life as we do, not millions of overdubs. Ozzy was stuck on one line, but Ronnie puts ideas in. And that's getting back to what I was saying a second ago, that Ronnie James Dio brought this new energy that if you're going to do what they did, you're going to take this iconic band and you're going to take somebody, a critical person out like Ozzy, who just is such an important person, not just in that band, but in pop culture and in music, and replace him. You don't do yourself any favors trying to get somebody that sounds just like him. I mean, one of the, just going to share a personal thing here. Journey. Look, Arnell, I think that's his name, the kid that's singing for them now, the kid from the Philippines, or he's not a kid, I think he's my age, but he just sounds like Steve Perry. And Neil Schon made a comment once. He says, there was a journey before Steve Perry, there'll be a journey after Steve Perry. Well, the reality of it is, the guy sounds just like Steve Perry, so apparently there's not a journey after Steve Perry. Because all they did is just try to replace the same voice, and to me it kind of distracts from the music. Okay, but my point here is, if you're going to replace somebody like Ozzy in a band like this, you can't just try to put an Ozzy clone in there. And especially when they were already losing their way, you may as well try something different. And that's what they did. They get Ronnie James Dio shows up, and they create something, in my opinion, that was amazing, as good if not better than what they had done with Ozzy. And it could have failed miserably, right? But in my opinion, it succeeded wildly. And I think that plays out when you consider the fact that years and years later, they got back together, put another album out, and then even toured as Heaven and Hell later, because there was so many people like me that loved that stuff so much. We loved Black Sabbath for Black Sabbath's sake, and with Ozzy, and then we loved what was created here. And in some cases, just as much as we loved the stuff with Ozzy. For me, like I said, I was introduced to him that way originally. Okay. Ronnie puts his ideas in. Ronnie says of Heaven and Hell, well, ideas had been kicked around by the others when Ozzy was not there. I had some songs. I infused some different life into the band. I guess some old ideas crept in, but I'm always writing. Unquote. So, the Sabbath team is back. Their state of play is summed up in a past hit of theirs, Never Say Die. Or, as the pianist played, We'll Meet Again. So anyway, that's a review of what people were, I guess the discussion, the conversation that was going on at the time. There's a little bit of trepidation. There was a little bit of, we'll see. Hard to believe. Black Sabbath was losing their way. We were all kind of forgetting about them. And now they're coming back. Now they're back. And they've got this guy from Rainbow now that's going to... And by the way, to further play into that whole Deep Purple family tree thing, who was singing for Black Sabbath after Ronnie James Dio left on the album Born Again? Ian Gillan from Deep Purple. All of a sudden, Ian Gillan's Black Sabbath singer. Anyway, that's what I mean when I had another video I'd put out where I was talking about the family tree. We'll do another video sometime where we just go through some of the family tree, because it's amazing. All the different branches and all the different places and bands and musicians that all tie back into that Deep Purple family tree. Anyway, I'd love to get your feedback. If you made it all the way through the video and you listened to that article about Black Sabbath and what they were, this resurrection, this coming back to life, and bringing Ronnie James Dio in and starting the band over in a way with that album Heaven and Hell. How do you see it? What was your experience with it? Was yours like mine, where you were introduced to Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio, or was that a big change that you had a hard time dealing with? Anyway, I'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, follow the channel, like the video, leave any comments, questions, and with that, have a fantastic day.